Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we'll be interviewing Right Worshipful Brother Robert Johnson.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have 3/4 of our usual crew of hosts. We have Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth and myself, Very Worshipful Brother Matthew Appel, and we are Masons here in the great state of Washington. And Worshipful Brother Steven Chung from up in British Columbia with the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon. Unfortunately, our fourth host, Trevor, was not feeling too well, so hopefully he will recover soon. But we also have with us our very special guest, Right Worshipful Brother Robert Johnson, who is a Mason in Illinois and is a host of the Whence Came You podcast and one of the Masonic Roundtable guys and an author and all sorts of cool stuff. And I knew I was going to do this. I'm going to start fanboying. So I will just say, welcome, Robert. It's good to have you here.
It's fantastic to be here. I'm really excited. Doing these podcasts and talking about Masonry is one of my, if it wasn't my favorite thing, I'm doing the wrong thing. Right? I think we all love Freemasonry, and it's just a pleasure to be able to get together and chat with some like-minded brothers.
Here.
Absolutely.
So,
exactly.
One of the usual questions we ask guys who come on the podcast is just sort of how did you come into Masonry? So how did you become a Mason?
The classic story, which is the truth, is I missed out. I was a total scaredy cat. So I first was interested in Freemasonry because I had this Japanese friend of mine. His name is Yukitaro Hamada. And Yuki was the son of an architect, and he was an artist. And in his home, his dad was not always pleased with him because he was a free spirit. He wanted to be a businessman, And Yuki had all these books on art. And one day he loaned me this really cool book on tapestries. And I don't know why I had a passing interest in this. But one of the pictures in it was a relief, a tapestry that was a Masonic relief. All of the brothers who are Master Masons listening to this would know it as kind of the culmination, if you will, of that third degree. Is a scene that's on the on the tapestry. And I said, what the heck is this? And so then I just started Googling Freemasonry, and I didn't get a lot of wild conspiratorial stuff. I read about it. I had this kind of vision of what it would be. You ever read a book, right? And you develop all the characters and how everything goes. And then that's what happened. So then I went down to Orange Lodge in Orange, California, the Orange Circle. And I read this note that was on the door, and it was like, knock 3 times on the 3rd Tuesday of the month. And it just sounded really weird. I hadn't really encountered that kind of nomenclature before, or, verbiage on a door. And I was really weirded out. And I was like, all right, I'm out. This is too weird. And then about 5 years later, maybe 6, my son was born, and we were back here in Illinois. So before I was in California, and I just sent an email to the Grand Lodge of Illinois as an inquiry. And the next thing you know, I got a call from the secretary of what would be my mother lodge, Waukegan 78, and they invited me out to a lunch. They signed my petition. I went through the degrees, and that's how I got in. But my interest was that through Google, I kept hearing this thing like, we're working on stuff. We're working on philosophy. We're working on this. We're working on that. And so, like I said, I built this whole story in my mind, like you would do in a book. But then when I actually got to the lodge and I had been a member of the lodge for the first year, I realized, okay, the characters are totally different than they are in the book. in real life or in the movie, right? So yeah, that's kind of how I fell into Freemasonry.
Well, thankfully, they actually responded to your inquiry. That's unfortunately a pervasive issue amongst lodges that don't respond to those.
Yeah, well, I think the Grand Lodge, at that time, it would have been 2007. And what they had ended up doing was I sent the inquiry out. They said, hey, somebody will be in touch with you. And about 2 weeks later, I got an email from a guy named, just call him Brother Donahue. Brother Donahue said, hey, I'm the secretary over here and whatever. So it took about 2 weeks. I know today it's still even a really difficult program, even with the wonderful campaign that the Scottish Rite joint venture in putting together Not Just a Man, or I think it's Not Just a Man. I can't remember the name of the website, but it's a great site. I just haven't committed it. But that site is great because they have this contact form where anybody can just, hey, I am interested. And then they put them in contact with the right state. And then the state puts it down to the secretary. It's a really great chain of command. It brings it down. But if you listen to the North American Conference of Grand Masters, it seemed like there were still a number, and they were really brotherly about it, but there was still a great number of Grand Lodges who, to be nice, have a lot of room to improve in terms of their response rate.
Is that the beafreemason.org website?
That is, yes.
Yeah. Not Just a Man, a Mason. That's an amazing program.
Yeah, I think it's doing a lot of good for us. I mean, I know there are people out there that aren't real big fans of advertising or whatever. And a good friend of mine, Mark St. Cyr, he is a world-class business writer, and he had said something not too long ago, and he just put it in a recent post for Midnight Freemasons. And, it's a longer blog post, so if you get through it, awesome. If you don't, I think the key takeaway is, when we're out in the community, what do you want them to know about us? It's not that just they made these things that we bought, right? Like the thing that you want them to remember is how cool we were, and like the mystique and the lessons and how awesome we were as people. I want to be like that. And so we, like he was just saying, we kind of like missed the mark or whatever. And I think that's kind of what be a Not Just a Mason is that campaign kind of portrays. Is this idea is, no, we're not just the people that's selling green beans at the local fair. We're not the people that just do child identification for you at fairs and all that things.
Pancake breakfast.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not just doing that stuff. We are the people in your communities who are maybe community leaders or people who are active, at the the PTO. We ask, hey, the PTO, local school district, hey, these 7 lodges that reside in the school district right here, these 2 lodges in the school district, we're really interested in, we see that you have a shortage of cash flow for the liberal arts programs in your school. How can we help with that? We would love to donate some money and help you out with art supplies or do whatever. Like those are the kinds of things I think are important that I think we kind of missed the mark on sometimes.
It reminds me, we were in our lodge celebrates in a Veterans Day parade every year. And we were walking in the parade several years ago. And my brother exclaimed afterwards, he said, why don't you all wear why do you wear your suits and stuff? Why don't you wear your company t-shirts or company shirts or, uniforms or whatever? I said, well, that'd be kind of weird. And he goes, well, no, I think it'd be good because then you could see the police officer and the fireman and the ambulance guy and the I worked for a real estate office at the time. So you could see all these different people from different walks of life and what they do and who they are, and not just these guys in suits.
Man, wouldn't that be cool to see a graphic? Maybe like somebody put together like a short film snip, right? Like where guys are just getting dressed every day. And then all like at the same time, like, okay, they're getting dressed overalls, or you get a guy putting on like slicks, or you get a putting on work boots, another guy fixing his tie or a tuxedo, or a judge putting on his collar or something, right? And then it like fades to black, and then it comes back, and you all just see them like tying the knot on the apron. It's like, that would be really cool. If anybody does that who listens to this, you should do that.
There are some stuff out there, and our membership committee tried to do something like that a couple of years ago. We did some cool stuff, and but yeah, I can, as you talked about creating that video or creating that book in your mind, I was totally seeing what you're talking about.
Yeah, Northern Jurisdiction, get on.
I was totally envisioning that marketing piece coming together. Yeah, no, that I mean, yeah, beautiful. I was putting that whole vision together as you said that, and it was like, yeah, and then they're all standing there in their tuxedos and their aprons, right? Like, now tell them apart.
So Robert, you alluded to the idea of advertising, and I wanted to, if you don't mind, maybe go down this rabbit hole a little bit.
Sure.
I'm a kind of a firm believer. I don't evangelize that idea so much, although Matt would say I evangelize a lot of ideas. But but the idea of I think we do need to toot our own horn to some extent, and I really appreciate your perspective on it. Toot our own horn about the good things we do and kind of who we are as character people, and not so much the works themselves. But in my mind, I think we could talk a little more openly about Masonry. I've sat at the table with some guys that are in, now I say in their late age, but I'm already in my late age. They're in their later years and they're just new Masons. And I say, gosh, well, why didn't you join younger? And they said, well, my dad and uncle would go off on Thursday nights, they would take off their overalls and they get on their suits and they went off to this meeting. And I didn't know what it was about until 25 years later when he was in his 30s or 40s, and he finally asked, and it's the old adage, well, it's about time. And why can't we, or why don't we ask more, other than the unwritten rule? And sometimes in code or constitutions it is written that you can't do it, I suppose. But to me, there's, at the very last moment, you're standing at the doorway in your first degree and you take that action and they ask you the question, as long as the answer to that question is truthful, my own free will and accord, why can't we do more?
Because if you're asked, then he is being encouraged by a thought of someone else's, not on his own free will and accord. Right?
As long as you're not being bribed, though, I could see if you were saying, "Oh, Steve, I'm not going to give you this contract if you don't become a Mason." Yeah, I would totally agree with that. But if I said, "Steve, you're a really good guy. I've known you for a while, or I've seen your works, or whatever," and you should, and I know they say, "Well, that you can say that. Why don't you become a Mason?" But why don't we do that even more? I mean, what's the wrong side of doing that? As long as it is truthful and they are ultimately of their own free will and accord.
It's really it's kind of a subjective question, right? Because I think the verbiage for me and what I give to people as a secretary is, do you seriously declare that uninfluenced by friends or mercenary motives, you freely offer yourself up for the mysteries of Freemasonry? And so what is uninfluenced, right? Like, am I influenced by my friends to do this? Or is it like a real calling? I can honestly say that nobody in my entire family at the time that I knew this was a Mason. And still today, the only guy I know who was like my great-great-granddad, Gilbert Lafayette Johnson, which I found out much later. But that is a huge debate. And I think some of the words written by, there's a great book. If you can find it, awesome. It's called The Master's Lectures. It was a short publication put out by Evans Lodge in Illinois. It went national and even global. People love the book, but it's like a month-by-month thing, themes for Freemasonry, January to December. And one of the chapters is on membership, or maybe it's fellowship. And it says something like, troping through our west gates are men where education has lit no fire in their eyes. Or it also says that, can we truly, all these guys that are coming through the west gate are joining because their friend is a member of the lodge and they wanted them to join. Hey, I want to spend more time with you, join the lodge, or their, family members and whatnot. And they're really rallying against this idea. But if I ask my son to join the Masons, maybe that's wrong. But if I say, hey, I used to do this thing. I mean, I do this thing every Thursday, every Friday, whatever it is. Maybe, would you ever consider doing that? You have any curiosity about it?
Right, or develop that potential interest, or at least offer the
Yeah.
here's a book to read, or
Well,
here's.
Yeah. Have you
Well,
ever
you can approach it completely Machiavellian and come along with some just pointed statements of, I go and I do this thing, and maybe one day you can be doing that with us, right? Or without directly saying that, we want you to join or you should come and check this out. Maybe talk about how much fun you're having, or that type of thing, a positive aspect of it instead. But this debate goes on for, like you said, it's an age-old debate, and there's lots of guys who think we should be advertising, and I think advertising might be the wrong word. Maybe more marketing or branding or something like that, just to remind people we're still here and that we're in their neighborhoods, in their towns, and that we are available, right? So
I think that's true. I think if my son so my oldest son is 14, but like when he's 20 and maybe he sees my lodge do something that he's just like, that's crazy cool. How can I be a part of that? Well, maybe there's a way to say through our works, our good deeds and works, right? But then that falls back to what Worship Brother Steven is saying, that maybe it's a branding thing. It is interesting.
Well, like I've got a 30-year-old stepson and an 18-year-old stepson, and they both know that I'm a Mason. I'm very active. There's no secret in my house. And actually, they both know that their grandfather and their step-grandfather and their great-grandfather were also Masons, because I've since received their aprons and things like that, their jewels and whatnot passed down after they've passed on. And I still have heard no interest in it. And I mean, I keep putting it out there, the different things, right? And I try to come up with all these different thought-provoking statements or questions that I can. And Justin's never asked. 30 years old. Is he going to ask? Who knows? But I can't bring myself to ask him, right? And then so it's like, okay, are they gonna end up being the example that David gave? 30 years down the road, they finally ask, and then they really see what they've been missing out on and how much fun we could have been having together in between, right? So most people, or I, like most, am really tempted to want to ask them, because I think that there's some really great experiences that they can have and learn from and so on. But it goes against the rules.
Yeah, I think too that's what the 6 steps process is for, right? And then potentially the investigation process and the development of that. When we implemented the 6 steps in Washington, and we stole from the Great North, people were so nervous about the process and it was going to slow things down. I said, well, it could take 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months. It's up to the guy and up to the lodge. There's not a timetable attached to this. It's just a process to work through so everybody can understand each other and what it's about. And I think that would be a great opportunity to say, hey, let's get you started on the 6 steps and just let you work through the process. Come to some social events, come to some things, meet some guys, read some things about it, learn about it. And if the guy if it's not right for him at the end of that 6 steps, then he's filtered himself out, I think. We had a guy who was coming to our 6 steps and come to our social events month after month after month. And great guy. And we were just kind of hanging out one night, and I finally said, "Hey, has anybody asked you about the next step officially?" And he goes, "No, actually." I said, "Okay, well, it's really great that you're coming, and you seem like a great guy. So next time, let's get together. We'll go over the 12 questions, and just, they're designed to be answered yes. I mean, they're pretty simple. It's not a 12-step; it's a 12-question program. And so we want you to learn more and make sure." And he got to the one about being his lifelong commitment to Masonry, and he didn't understand specifically. I said, "This is a lifelong commitment." And he said, "Oh," he said, "I don't know about that yet." I said, "Oh, okay, well, no problem." I said, "Either you need some more information, or we need to give you some more information, or help you along that path, whatever. And, let's keep getting together and talk about it." And he stopped coming, which, that's kind of what the system's designed to do. It's not really designed to keep them away. It's designed to pull them in, I think. And if it's not right, though, it does do its purpose, serve its purpose.
Absolutely. I think to an extent, right, the investigation committee sometimes, and everything kind of involved in the process of joining, really shouldn't be to acclimate somebody to this life-changing thing that they're going to become a part of. In many respects, it should be viewed equally as a process to filter people out. And there's nothing wrong with Masonry not being for somebody, right? I mean, I have great friends who, mentees at work, all know I'm a Freemason, and they know that I'm committed and all these things. And when they ask about it, I tell them. And when we get to certain questions, like the one you said, right? Like, it's a lifelong commitment, because I can't unring that bell. I need you to tell me you're going to live like a Mason for the rest of your life, right? Which doesn't sound so terrible when I say it out loud, because all we're doing is good stuff. I just hey, is it right? Then, is it wrong? Don't do those things. Whatever the social contract is. But it's just interesting to note that I think it's okay to say these questions sometimes filter people out, and that's an okay process. It doesn't, like, what is it? It doesn't make you. One of my favorite things on that, Not Just a Man, was as a title slide that says, "Being a Mason doesn't make you better than anybody else," or something like that. But somebody changed it so that it said, "Oh wait, yes it does." It was terrible, but I laughed at it because I think people automatically think that, if you don't make it through the West Gate, you're somehow, not as good a person. It just means that this is not your gig, man. That's all.
And
right. And of course, that this age-old debate has now gone segued, and I'd like to kind of bring it back, because I know we get limited time on our podcast. So if I may, what got Robert Johnson started to do a podcast from getting into Masonry, and not just, one, but now he's involved in multiple?
Great question. The only reason I started doing a podcast was my uncle, not a Mason, but is always the forefront technology nerd, loves technology. And one day he got me into photography when I was like 18 years old, and I still am an avid photographer. And one day he bought a podcasting microphone, like a Yeti or something. And I said, "What are you going to do with that?" He said, "I don't know." And I was a copycat. I was like, "All right, well, I'll do it with you. Let's figure this stuff out." Right. So I bought a podcasting kit for $100, which you can still get. I think it's like $130 now, but it's a Behringer podcast kit on Amazon. And I bought that, and I said, "What am I going to do?" And after I had joined Freemasonry, there was really no education. Again, remember I said that when I joined, I had read the book on Freemasonry, and when I got to the movie of Freemasonry, the characters were different. The whole the whole scheme was different than I was like, I don't like this movie. I like the book better. I said, how do I get the education that I'm looking for? And so I started searching for educational resources. Of course, I came across things like Midnight Freemasons and Chris Hodap's blog and all of these things. But one thing that was just so amazing, and I cannot tell you guys how cool it was and the indebtedness that I have to this guy. And we've only conversed a few times. I don't know if he knows what a big deal he is to me, but Brother Scott Blaskin, who's a Canadian brother, he did something called The Digital Freemason, which was a podcast. And it was like, I loved it because it always started off with this quote from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Hunter S. Thompson, right? And then he went in as a welcome digital Freemason. I'm Scott Blaskin, yada, yada, yada. Short research paper. So dude was reading just short things. These podcasts were never more than 15 minutes. And if he messed up on a word, he just kept reading. He was like, whatever. He just said it again. Like it was just conversational and read the paper. Hey, see you next week. And he had done a ton of episodes and they're still out there. And I loved it. And so I said, well, I would love to do this too, but I would read like longer Masonic papers. And I would probably just, read longer papers and try to supplement more because there's only one out there that was consistent and it was Scott's. So I emailed him. I can't remember if I got a response right away. And then a few months later, he called it quits. Like he wrote a little handwritten note, thanks, Scott or whatever, and put it out on the web. And I was so bummed out. And then I was like, well, I can't really do this. I put out one episode. I was going to do just one and see how it went. And then that one episode got like 2,000 downloads in 2 weeks. And I was like, holy cow. And that was back in July of 2010. And I just started reading the papers that I wanted to read and talk about in the lodge. And I was learning along the way. I was like, well, if I'm going to read these, maybe somebody else doesn't like to read. Because I used to be like, I hated reading. Like as a kid, I could not do it. I didn't get into reading until I was like 14. And so then I wasn't doing an episode. Like I was doing it once a month. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, I'll do it weekly. And if I missed an episode, I'd get an email. What happened to the show? Oh my gosh. And then what changed it all was actually I got this email from this trucker. He's a brother who's on the road all the time. He's like, dude, been a Mason for 22 years, haven't been to lodge in 16 years because I'm on the road, busting his butt, to put food on the table and make these runs across the country, delivering food or whatever he was doing. And he said that listening to the podcast every week was like a replacement for lodge. And it made him feel like he was back in the lodge or something. And I'm reading this thing and I'm just like, oh my God. And my wife's like, well, if you didn't have a reason to do it before, you're reading this anyway, just record it. I was like, okay. And so I got better at recording and editing, right? Because as you guys probably know, if you decide to edit your podcast at all, that's a big decision you make before you start podcasting. Am I going to edit or just let it roll? And WCY, I edit. So for every 45 minutes of audio is probably an hour and a half of editing. So if I read it for 45 minutes, plus an hour and a half of editing, plus artwork production, you guys know, it's crazy. So it's a labor of love, as you guys are aware. And that's why I started it, was just to get education that I wasn't getting. And then it evolved into, okay, I'm getting this education for myself. And apparently there's a lot of people who also feel like they're not getting education and they're supplementing their Masonic experience with this podcast. And like, that was like a big weight. And now there's so many great Masonic podcasts out there, this one included. I feel like finally there's content for the new generation of Masons. I don't mean like new generations of dudes or ladies or whatever. I mean like the fresh Masons who come into the fraternity and are looking for more education opportunity, want to know more about any topic. I mean, the Knox or lodge protocol, or what do I do if I'm late, or all of these things, because no lodge really hits all the marks. We just don't. We can't. We're not perfect. And so I think all of these podcasts are just supplementing the Masonic experience in the 21st century. It's awesome.
Well, before Matt wraps us, I was one of those original 2,000 downloads, I think.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
You only had 300 episodes available, and like the first 100 episodes had dropped out. And
Matt, Matt, we lost your audio. Can you hear us? Your audio is gone. Uh-oh. Does that mean I'm gonna have to wrap?
Your audio is just low.
Yes, if it's unplugged or your gain's down, maybe.
Am I back? Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
No. Well, our own fanboy can't wrap the show today, so I'm gonna have to step in and see if I could do a good job. Well, Robert, thank you so much for coming out tonight, and hopefully you're able to stick around and we can record another segment here and get you up on the. And we'll have to think of something thought provoking to really dive in. But on behalf of Matt and Steven and myself, I really appreciate you coming out tonight.
Thank you.